Why did the flight attendant's voice tremble like that? Why did the words feel heavier than the turbulence? Emma Reynolds pressed her book flat against her lap, the edges bending slightly beneath her grip. Just a passenger. That's all she was today. Row 12B, window seat, jeans, cardigan, nothing more. To the people around her, she was invisible. Just another tired traveler hoping for a quiet hour and 45 minutes between Dallas and Denver. But the human ear recognizes tone before it recognizes words, and the tone in the attendant's voice wasn't normal. It wasn't the cheerful cadence of safety instructions or the routine call for a doctor after a passenger fainted. No, this was something else. It was urgency disguised as calm, and Emma had heard it before. The cabin buzzed with soft murmurs, heads craned. Seatbelt buckles snapped as a few people unfastened. Curious, the intercom clicked again, and the request repeated. If there is a doctor or trained medical professional on board, please come forward immediately. The air thickened. Emma slipped. Her earbuds out. The hum of the engine still droned steady, but the sound now felt thin, like a blanket full of holes. A man in the back pressed his call button. A woman across the aisle muttered something about her husband's medical training. But Emma didn't relax, because then came the second request. If you have medical training or aviation training, please make yourself known to the flight crew right away. Aviation training. The words didn't just hang in the air. They cut through it. Sharp, impossible to ignore. Emma's pulse spiked. A lifetime ago, those words had meant her. A decade ago, she would have stood without hesitation. Her boots planted on tarmac after tarmac, her call sign echoing across radios. But that was another life, a broken one. Now she was a science teacher with papers stacked on her desk back home. Students who asked too many questions, a life that was deliberately small. She had buried the other version of herself years ago, the one who flew through storms, who trusted her instincts at 35,000 feet, who once carried her brother's coffin draped in a flag. She wasn't that woman anymore, and yet. Her eyes slid to the cockpit door. It was ajar. That never happened. And through the crack she saw movement, frantic movement, one flight attendant kneeling, another speaking into a radio with her hand pressed white-knuckled against the frame. Emma knew before they said it. The captain was down. The flight attendant ran back into the aisle, voice cracking, but clear. We need a pilot. Gasps, curses, panic, the words spread like fire. Pilot, 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 and then, impossibly, the attendant appeared in Emma's row. Tablet in hand, passenger manifest open, her eyes locked directly on Emma. Are you Emma Reynolds? The name hit her harder than the turbulence. Her name, spoken aloud in front of strangers. It wasn't just a question. It was a reminder. A mirror she didn't want. Her throat closed. The woman beside her clutched her hand as if she'd already known. Passengers twisted in their seats to stare. Whispers rushing like wind through grass. Emma froze, her chest constricted. Memories slamming into her like an uninvited guest. The last time she sat in a cockpit, she hadn't walked away proud. She had walked away broken. A crash, a coffin. Her younger brother, Noah, gone. She had promised herself, never again. She would never touch a yoke, never climb into a cockpit, never let the sky have her twice. But the attendant's eyes weren't asking politely. They were pleading. Air traffic control flagged your name. You're listed as a certified military pilot. Is that true? Emma could lie. Say it was a mistake. Say her credentials expired. Let someone else come forward. Surely someone else would. Except no one moved. Not one person stood. The co-pilot was barely more than a kid, sweating, white-knuckled on the yoke. The captain slumped over, unmoving. The plane drifting, and 182 lives depended on an answer. Emma heard the whisper in her head, old and unwelcome. You've done this before. Her mouth went dry. She swallowed hard. Then, finally, she stood. Yeah, she said. That's me. The cabin fell into silence so absolute it pressed against her skin. Fear still clung to the air, but now it mixed with something else. Hope. The teenager clutching his mother's arm. The elderly couple praying in silence. The businesswoman sizing her up like a gamble. Their eyes burned into her as if her next step determined everything. She walked forward, every footstep louder than it should have been. At the cockpit door, the attendant hesitated. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Emma's answer came without thought, without filter. "I'm not, but I'm the only one who is." Inside, chaos. The captain lay slumped, lips tinged blue, oxygen mask pressed against his face. But it wasn't enough. He wasn't flying again. The co-pilot spun in his chair, eyes wide, drowning in panic. I don't know what happened." He stammered. "One minute he was fine, then he's gone. I tried. But turbulence. I can't." Emma's hand gripped his shoulder. Firm. Steady. "Breathe. You're not alone anymore." He blinked at her like she wasn't real then. Slowly nodded. The panel flickered with readings. Altitude 34,000. Fuel lower than comfortable. Speed shaky. And ahead, black sky swelling. Storm building like a living beast. Emma slid into the captain's seat. Her hands hovered above the controls. Foreign, yet familiar. The seat didn't feel borrowed. It felt like a home she had abandoned. She pulled on the headset, adjusted the mic, her voice steady. "This is Emma Reynolds. I'm taking control of Flight 227. The co-pilot froze. "Wait. The Emma Reynolds?" She glanced sideways. "Depends on what you've heard. You were top of your class. Tactical rescue ops. You landed a jet with no hydraulics in Qatar. That was a long time ago." She cut him off. "Right now, we've got 182 people counting on us, Focus." Static cracked through the radio. "Flight 227. This is Denver Center. We read the emergency ping. Confirm pilot status." Emma clicked the mic. "Captain incapacitated. I am assuming temporary. Command, formerly USAF. Request priority clearance and medical assistance on landing." Pause then. "Roger. Flight 227. Weather unstable. Thunderstorms building. Possible reroute advised." Emma's jaw tightened. "Negative. Fuel too low. We're going to Denver." Another pause. Then, "Understood. Runway 8 left being cleared." The co-pilot stared at her. "You sure about this?" She didn't answer with words, just tightened her grip on the yoke. Her eyes narrowed at the horizon, lightning flickering across bruised skies. This wasn't combat. No mission orders, no wingman beside her. Just families, strangers, terrified. Faces behind a thin door. She had walked away from this life once, swore she'd never return. But sometimes, life doesn't ask, it demands. She pressed the intercom. Her voice carried through the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Emma Reynolds. I'm a trained military pilot. I've taken command of Flight 227. We've hit a medical emergency. But we're flying safe and on course for Denver. I need everyone to remain calm. Remain seated and trust us." Silence, then applause, scattered at first. Then swelling, a teenager crying softly, a prayer whispered. A businesswoman closing her eyes and nodding. The air shifted. Emma turned the intercom off. Her voice had steadied them, but inside she was shaking. The storm outside was nothing compared to the storm in her chest, the last time she sat in a cockpit. She had walked away broken. Now she was back. The storm ahead loomed larger, lightning carving across the clouds like claws. But she didn't flinch. She leaned forward, eyes fixed on the horizon, and whispered to herself, barely audible, "Not this time." What made her think she could still do this? After 9 years of silence, after burying her wings, what gave her the right to believe she could fly again? The cockpit shuddered as turbulence rippled through the fuselage. Raindrops smacked against the windshield, a steady percussion building toward chaos. Emma steadied her breathing. one hand tightening on the yoke, the other resting on the throttle. Muscle memory tingled in her fingertips, as though her body remembered what her mind doubted. The co-pilot, Kyle, his namatag reed, was rattled but trying to hold himself together. His hands hovered uncertainly over the switches, his breath shallow. Emma saw the sweat dripping down his temple, the white of his knuckles as he clutched the edge of the console. "You really haven't flown since you left the Air Force?" His voice was almost disbelieving, a question half born of awe and half of fear. She didn't look at him, eyes stayed forward, scanning instruments, reading weather patterns. 9 years, she answered, her tone flat, almost detached. "And you just—" His voice cracked as the plane jolted again. "You just came back like this." Emma exhaled slowly, adjusting trim. "Not like nothing happened. Everything happened. But hesitation isn't a luxury right now." Kyle swallowed hard, nodded, and forced himself to mirror her steadiness. The radio crackled again. "Flight 227. Weather cells intensifying ahead. Wind shear likely on approach. Do you request alternate routing?" Emma's eyes locked on the horizon. The storm was swelling, towering anvils of black and violet cloud lit by flashes of jagged light. Turning wasn't an option. "Negative, Denver. We don't have the fuel. We're coming in." The silence on the other end felt like judgment. Then, reluctantly, "Roger that." Flight 227. Emergency priority confirmed. Runway 8 left remains cleared. A harsher jolt rattled the cockpit. Coffee spilling from a cup wedged near the throttle. Kyle flinched. Emma didn't. Her grip tightened. Movement sharp, precise. She was back in an old rhythm, one her body knew even when her heart screamed at her to stop. But she couldn't stop the memory. 9 years ago, Pacific skies. A rescue mission gone sideways. Her brother Noah flying lead, his voice calm, steady. Her mirror in every way, until the fire, until the alarms, until his aircraft spiraled into the ocean while hers limped back on half-dead engines. He had trusted her with his 6 o'clock all their lives, and she had watched him disappear in smoke and flame. That was the day she left the sky, and now the sky was dragging her back. A tremor ran through her chest. She fought it down. "Descend 2,000 feet, she ordered, voice steady. "Storm fronts heavier up high. We'll cut beneath some of it." Kyle nodded, flipping switches, echoing the descent callouts like a student repeating after a teacher. He was young, maybe late 20s. Emma could feel his nerves like static, but she could also feel him trying. He was learning in real time that calm was contagious, and so was fear. The cabin lights flickered. A chorus of gasps echoed faintly from behind the locked door. Emma didn't let herself imagine them. She couldn't afford to see faces right now. Only numbers, only instruments, only the thin strip of earth they had to reach intact. She leaned into the mic again. "Denver Center. Confirm medical crews on standby for incapacitated captain." "Confirmed. Flight 227. Ambulances and crash fire rescue positioned." The phrase crash fire rescue thudded in her ears. She ignored it. Kyle's voice broke the silence. "I read about you in training. You were kind of a legend." Emma's jaw tightened. "That was a long time ago." He hesitated, then pressed. "Why'd you stop?" Her throat closed. For a moment, the storm outside felt easier than the one inside. "Because I lost someone, and I couldn't." She cut herself short, eyes narrowing on the approach vector. "Focus, Kyle. Not story time, but inside." The words continued, silent, because I couldn't bear to fly without him. The plane jolted again, harder this time. A child screamed faintly in the cabin. Kyle's hands twitched toward the controls. Instinct pulling him, panic pushing him. Emma caught the motion and shook her head. "Don't fight it. Trust the aircraft. Trust me." He froze, then nodded again. She leveled them out, calm but fierce, her heartbeat pounding in her throat. Every second was a negotiation with fear. Her own, Kyle's, the passengers. but she had learned something once. Long ago. Panic spreads faster than fire. Control spreads too. She chose control. Her headset crackled again. Flight 227. Winds at Denver now 20 knots. Visibility dropping to 1.5 miles. Are you declaring Mayday? Emma's hand tightened on the mic. The word pressed against her lips, but she knew the weight it carried, the way it echoed. Declaring it wouldn't bring calm, it would confirm doom. Negative, Denver. Not yet. We're stable. The lie steadied her as much as it steadied the others. Kyle exhaled shakily, trying to match her tone. You don't scare easy, do you? Emma almost laughed. Almost. You think I'm not scared? I'm terrified, but fear doesn't land planes. He stared at her, stunned, then nodded again, as if memorizing the line for later. The storm loomed larger, lightning painting their cockpit in violent white flashes. The aircraft trembled, an aluminum bird trying to survive the wrath of the sky. Emma stared through it, eyes narrowed, jaw locked. She could almost hear Noah's voice beside her. You've still got it, Em. Her throat tightened. A single tear escaped, cutting down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away, didn't let Kyle see. She just pressed forward. Denver's lights shimmered faintly through the veil ahead. Distant, flickering beacons nod. Safety yet, but direction. She gripped the yoke harder, whispered under her breath. Hold together, girl. Just hold together. Another violent jolt slammed the fuselage. Warning alarms blared. Wind shear alert. The plane lurched sideways. Metal. Creaking. Kyle cursed. Passengers screamed behind them. Emma's voice cut through it all. Calm. Commanding. Counter tilt. Reduce throttle. Trim down. Donor correct. Her hands moved with surgical precision. Guiding. Correcting. Demanding. The aircraft bucked, but steadied. Kyle exhaled as though he'd just survived drowning. How did you? Flew through a dust storm in Kandahar once. This is just rain with attitude. She meant it as dry humor, but her voice cracked slightly. He caught it. Are you sure? He asked softly. Emma's eyes stayed forward. Runway lights now growing clearer. No, but that doesn't matter. We've got one shot. We land now, or we don't. The cockpit went quiet. The storm raged, but inside, a strange clarity filled the air. For the first time in 9 years, Emma felt it again. Not the grief, not the fear. The other thing, the one she had buried with no purpose. Why were the runway lights still so faint? Why, with every mile closer, did the storm feel like it was only growing? The cockpit pulsed with alarms. Wind shear warnings, stall alerts. The angry electronic chorus of a plane pushed to its limits. Emma's hands moved with the steadiness of someone who had lived here once, who had bled here once. Her muscles remembered what her mind fought to deny. She belonged in the seat. Kyle's voice cut through, tight, trembling. Altitude 900 feet. Glide slope steady. Emma narrowed her eyes, peering through the windshield. Sheets of rain blurred the world into streaks. The runway lights little more than ghostly smudges in the dark. Where are they? She muttered. Kyle's breath hitched. They should be clear by now, a warning horn screamed. Wind shear detected. The aircraft lurched sideways, flung like a toy by unseen fists of air. Emma's seatbelt cut into her shoulder. Kyle grabbed for the controls, panic flaring. Hold! Emma barked, voice sharp enough to cut through his fear. She fought the yoke, countered the tilt, eased throttle, adjusted flaps. Her movements weren't frantic. They were measured, exact. The plane bucked again, then steadied. Kyle's chest heaved. How did you? Emma didn't look at him. I told you. It's not nothing. It's never nothing. The rain hammered harder. Lightning flashed wide across the cockpit, a reflection briefly visible in the glass. Eyes narrowed, jaw tight. The ghost of the woman she used to be staring back at her. Denver Center, she called into the mic, her voice iron. Flight 227 on final. One attempt only. Fuel critical. Copy. Flight 227. The radio replied, steady but urgent. Runway 8 left cleared. Winds 20 knots cross. Gusting. Higher. Visibility 1 mile. Emergency cruise in position. Emma exhaled. Roger that. Behind them, the cabin was silent. That kind of silence wasn't peace. It was 182 people holding their breath, clinging to armrests, whispering prayers. Every cough, every stifled sob echoed like thunder in her ears. She imagined them all. The boy clutching his mother's sleeve. The old couple still holding hands. The woman in a business suit trying to hide her fear behind narrowed eyes. They didn't know her. They didn't know what she carried. But in this moment, she wasn't allowed to falter. Kyle's voice cracked. Most pilots. Most would circle back. Most have fuel, she said flatly. He flinched, then nodded, because he knew she wasn't bluffing. They had one shot. Landing gear, Emma commanded. Kyle flipped a switch. The groan of hydraulics, the thump of gear locking into place. A strange comfort in the mechanical sound. At least something was working. Then the stall warning blared again. Emma's voice cut sharp, decisive. Watch pitch, adjust trim. Don't fight the warning. It's the wind lying to us. Kyle's hand shook. How are you so calm? I'm not. Her voice cracked, raw but honest. But fear doesn't land planes. Control does. And she clung to that control with everything she had. Altitude, 600 feet. The runway lights blinked clearer through the rain faint. Lines of gold stretching like a promise. Speed 148 knots. Kyle reported. Hold it steady. Emma replied. Another jolt. The plane dipped. Passengers cried out. Kyle's hand shot to the controls. Emma's snapped faster. She corrected, guided, forced the aircraft level. And in that moment, a single tear slid down her cheek. She didn't hide it. Didn't need to. She just kept flying. Altitude, 200 feet. The runway finally visible, stretching out like a lifeline in the storm. Brace. Emma whispered under her breath. 100 feet. Throttle down. 50. Wheels extended. 20. A crosswind slammed them sideways at the last second. Violent and sudden. Emma gritted her teeth. Dipped the right wing. Ruddered left. Fought gravity and air and fear. The wheels slammed the runway. Bounce. Screech. Another bounce. Sparks flared. Reverse thrust. Engines roared. Brakes screaming. The plane skidded, hydroplaned, tires shrieking against wet asphalt. For a heartbeat, it felt like they wouldn't stop. And then, grip, tires locked, the skid slowed, the storm outside raged, but inside, the plane rolled to a grinding, miraculous halt, silence. And then, applause wild, unrestrained, shaking with relief. Passengers wept, hugged strangers, shouted her name. Emma sat frozen, hands still on the yoke, every nerve buzzing. Kyle let out a laugh that broke into a sob. We made it. Emma's voice was quiet, almost unbelieving. We did. She finally leaned back, her whole body trembling. The storm still howled outside, rain streaking the glass, lightning tearing across the sky. But in here, peace. She glanced sideways at the captain, slumped beside her, breathing shallow but alive, paramedics already rushing forward. A reminder, not everyone makes it through unscathed. Her eyes drifted back to the windshield. To the storm, Noah, she whispered in her heart. I did it, little brother. And for the first time in years, the words didn't feel like a plea. They felt like a promise. She had landed them. She had brought them home. The cabin erupted in ovation as the passengers stood, clapped, cried, phones filmed, voices shouted her name. Emma. Reynolds. She saved us. She's the pilot. Emma removed her headset slowly, her shoulders slumping, not in defeat but in release. Every muscle ached. Every nerve hummed. But inside, something stirred to life again. She wasn't just a woman in 12B anymore. She wasn't just a passenger. She was a pilot. and whether she wanted it or not, the world now knew it too. Why was no one moving? Why, after the wheels had screamed to a halt, after the impossible landing, did the cabin sit frozen in silence? Emma Reynolds kept her hands on the yoke, her eyes forward, heart hammering in her chest. The storm still howled. Beyond the glass, rain streaking down in angry rivers, lightning clawing at the sky, the engines hummed low, steady, as if even the machine itself didn't dare break the silence. And then, like a spark catching, it began. A single pair of hands. Clapping, soft at first, unsure, then another and another. Applause spread like wildfire through the cabin until it roared louder than the storm outside. Passengers cried openly, hugged strangers, whispered prayers. Relief spilled out in tears and laughter, and then came her name. She saved us. That woman, Emma. Voices echoed it down the rows, from one end of the plane to the other. Emma Reynolds, the pilot, the one from 12B. Emma closed her eyes for a moment, let the sound wash over her. It wasn't pride. It wasn't relief. It was something heavier, something she couldn't name. Kyle tore off his headset, laughter spilling from his chest like the first breath. After drowning, his hands still shook, but his smile was wide. "I don't even know what to say," he whispered, glancing at her. "You don't have to," Emma murmured. Her voice cracked with exhaustion. Emergency responders knocked on the cockpit door. Attendants opened it, their faces pale, eyes wide as they took in the scene. The unconscious captain, the soaked, trembling co-pilot, and Emma, the woman who wasn't supposed to be here, but was. "You flew us through that storm," one attendant said softly, disbelief thick in her voice. "That was impossible." Emma stood slowly, knees stiff, body aching. It wasn't impossible. It was necessary. The paramedics rushed past her, tending to the collapsed captain. Transferring him to a stretcher, Emma stepped aside, watching as they moved quickly. Efficiently, he was alive, shallow breath, pale skin, but alive. She hadn't saved everyone, but she had saved the rest. Her gaze drifted back to the cockpit door, where faces now peered in, dozens of them, passengers, crew, ordinary people who had been one gust of wind away from disaster. They weren't looking at her like she was a teacher or a passenger or even a pilot. They looked at her like she was something else entirely. A lifeline. The flight attendant extended her hand. "Come on. They want to thank you." Emma hesitated. She didn't want the spotlight. She didn't want cameras and chants and headlines. She had never wanted that. She only wanted to get them down alive. But something inside nudged her forward. She stepped out into the aisle, and the cabin erupted. A standing ovation, loud, unfiltered, raw. Phones rose into the air, filming, recording. Hands reached out for her, strangers clasping hers. Tears streaking faces. A woman hugged her like she was family. A child whispered to his mother, "That's the lady who flew the plane." Emma's chest tightened. She smiled, small but real, overwhelmed but calm. She didn't raise her arms. She didn't bask. She only nodded, acknowledging their gratitude with the quiet dignity she carried. In her bones, Kyle joined her, patting her shoulder with a grin. "That was the smoothest rough landing I've ever had." Emma smirked faintly. "I'll take that as a compliment." Row by row, passengers disembarked, some pausing to hug her, to shake her hand, to whisper words she couldn't fully hear through the storm of emotion. One slipped a folded note into her palm. She didn't look at it yet. When the last passenger left, she found herself standing alone in the aisle, the silence of the emptied cabin settling heavy around her. She glanced back at row 12B, her seat. Her anonymity, the place where she had started this flight as just another traveler, she whispered to herself, so quietly no one else could hear, "You're not just a passenger anymore." Hours later, inside the airport's private security wing, Emma sat on a bench, a blanket draped over her shoulders, though she wasn't cold. A cup of untouched coffee sat beside her. The chaos of the last 3 hours replayed in her head on a loop. The cockpit alarms, Kyle's panicked voice, the weight of the yoke in her hands. Her phone buzzed. Dozens of missed calls, unknown numbers. A voicemail from her principal back. At the high school, Emma. I just saw the news. Are you okay? Please call me. The news. She opened her phone. Headlines blared across the screen like searchlights. Passenger heroically lands plane after pilot collapse. Former Air Force pilot saves 182 lives. From teacher to hero. The woman in 12B. Videos had already spread. Shaky passenger recordings of her walking down the aisle. Of her voice over the intercom. Of her standing in the aisle afterward as applause thundered. Emma felt exposed, as though her life had been peeled open. And placed under a spotlight she never asked for. She hadn't wanted recognition. She hadn't even wanted to fly again. She had only done what had to be done. But the world had noticed. And it wasn't going to look away. The door creaked open. A senior FAA official stepped in, a stack of papers in his hand, a smile on his face. Emma Reynolds, he greeted warmly. I'm not going to pretend we're not impressed. That landing was masterful. Emma managed a tired smile. Thanks, he sat across from her, lowering his voice. Your name is buzzing everywhere. News outlets, aviation circles, even military command. I've already had 3 retired generals text me asking, is that the Emma Reynolds? She sighed, rubbing her temple. I was hoping to disappear after this, he chuckled. You're going to have to try harder. We pulled your old flight logs. Some of your missions were borderline legendary. And now this, nearly 200 lives saved. I want you to consider coming back. Emma's eyes flicked up, cautious. To what? The Air Force? He shook his head. Not necessarily. To the skies. Commercial. Charter. Emergency training. There are programs begging for someone like you. You don't have to decide now, but think about it. You're not just a one-time hero. Emma, you're a pilot. You always were. He slid a card across the table. She stared at it. A simple card, yet heavy as a door waiting to be opened. He left. Her alone, Emma looked down at her hand, at the folded note a passenger had given her. She opened it slowly, fingers trembling. You saved my daughter's life. I was on my way to bury my father. You gave me one last moment with him. I'll never forget you. Her throat tightened. Tears burned her eyes. It wasn't just a landing. It was something bigger. A ripple, a gift. She reached into her bag, pulled out something she hadn't touched in nearly a decade. Her old flight log book, worn leather. Edges fraying. Her name still etched in gold letters. CAPT. Emma Reynolds, USF. 422nd Tactical Airlift Squadron. Her thumb traced the letters like a forgotten language. She opened it. The last entry stared back at her. Tatar. Emergency descent. Engine failure. Loss of hydraulics. Successful landing. 1 fatality. LT. Noah. Reynolds. Her brother. She closed the book quickly, clutching it against her chest. The ache would never vanish. But maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to live chained to it forever. She looked out the rain-streaked window. The storm still raging over Denver. But inside her, something shifted. The storm didn't scare her anymore. It felt like a conversation she was finally ready to have again. Why hadn't sleep come? Why, after the chaos, after the storm, after the applause of strangers, did the silence of a hotel room feel heavier than the flight itself? Emma Reynolds sat at the small desk in her room, the storm still raging outside. Thunder cracked every few minutes. The Denver skyline lit in fleeting flashes of white. On the table before her lay 3 things: the FAA official's business card, her untouched coffee, and her old flight log book. Her fingers brushed the worn leather of the log. She hadn't opened it again since that night at the airport. The entry still haunted her. Noah's name etched forever under fatality. Her phone buzzed. Another headline. Another notification. The world refused to leave her alone. Miracle in the sky. Passenger named teacher turns hero pilot. Emma Reynolds. Why she walked away from the sky. She hated it. Not the gratitude, not the recognition, but the way her life had become a spectacle. They didn't know her. They didn't know the guilt she carried. A knock came at the door. She opened it to find Kyle, the young co-pilot, standing there in civilian clothes. Drenched from the rain, he grinned sheepishly. "I figured you wouldn't be sleeping," he said. She stepped aside. He entered, dripping on the carpet, his smile softer now. They sat by the window, watching the storm. "You ever going to fly again?" he asked after a long silence. Emma didn't answer immediately. She stared at the lightning. "I don't know. I wasn't supposed to fly at all." "You should," he said. "You're the best pilot I've ever seen." Emma's chest tightened. She wanted to argue, but the words didn't come. "I was terrified," she admitted. He laughed under his breath. "So was I." The storm outside flashed again, and for a moment she saw his reflection in the glass. Young, alive, grateful. She realized he wasn't just saying it. He meant it. To him, she wasn't just a passenger who stepped up. She was the reason they were alive. Silence stretched between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. Then Kyle spoke again. "When the captain collapsed, I froze completely. I thought we were finished, and then they said your name, and you walked up front. I swear." It felt like the plane lifted again. Emma looked at him, startled by the rawness of it. But she didn't answer. She couldn't. Instead, she returned her gaze to the storm. The lightning no longer looked like a threat. It looked like a reminder that the sky was still there, waiting. 3 days passed. The news didn't stop. A name spread further than she ever wanted. Reporters crowded the hotel lobby. Aviation podcasts requested interviews. Retired officers reached out. And then an email came, short, direct, from the National Transportation Safety Board. "Captain Reynolds, we would be honored if you joined our emergency aviation safety panel next quarter. Your experience and skill would be invaluable." She read the words twice. Captain Reynolds, a name she hadn't heard in years. Now it followed her everywhere, like a title she had never truly lost. Later that afternoon, Kyle appeared again. This time, he had arranged something. "Come on," he said, almost shy. "I've got a friend with a vintage train plane, just a Cessna 172. Nothing big. Thought maybe you'd want to." "Feel it again." Emma hesitated, but somehow she found herself standing on the edge of a small airstrip outside Denver. The sky had cleared, the storm finally retreating. The air crisp and open. The aircraft gleamed in the sun, simple and small. So different from the Boeing she had just landed. A hangar worker handed her a headset. "Fuel-topped. She's yours if you want her." Emma's pulse spiked. Her heart threatened to pound out of her chest. She climbed into the cockpit, hands trembling slightly as they touched the familiar controls. She sat there for a long moment, the world waiting. This wasn't like Flight 227. No lives at stake, no collapsing captain. Just her, a machine, and the sky. She took a deep breath. If she pushed forward, there would be no more pretending this. Part of her life was over. She turned the key. The engine rumbled to life. She taxied to the edge of the runway, called in, then paused, not because of fear, but because she was finally listening to herself. Her hand pushed forward, the wheels lifted, and the sky welcomed her back like she had never left. At 2,500 feet, Denver spread beneath her. Roads, rooftops, fields, all small, all distant. World that had felt heavy on the ground now looked light, manageable, up here. Gravity obeyed, wind spoke clearly, and the past. The past didn't feel like a chain anymore. She banked gently over the foothills, the horizon wide, her hands steady on the yoke. For the first time in nearly a decade, she smiled. She wasn't flying away from something. She was flying toward something. Later that night, she sat on her hotel balcony, phone in hand, She finally returned a call to Principal Harris back at the school. "Emma." "God, it's good to hear your voice. Are you okay? Everyone here's talking about you like you're some kind of superhero." "I'm okay," she said quietly. "Better than I've been in a long time," he chuckled. "That kid in your physics class, the one who never listens?" He told everyone, "My teacher can fly a plane better than Iron Man." Emma laughed. "That's a stretch." His voice softened. "Are you coming back?" She hesitated. "I don't know. I might be needed somewhere else now." "You've always been more than just a teacher, Emma," he said gently. "Whatever you do next, just don't forget what you meant to us." She smiled. "I won't. After the call." She opened her flight logbook. For the first time in years, she wrote a new entry. Date: July 17th. Aircraft: Cessna 172. Duration: 12 hours. Purpose: personal reorientation. Location: Denver Regional. Notes: first solo flight since. NOAA. Result: sky still feels like home. She closed the book, her hands trembling. For the first time in 9 years, the page didn't end with loss. That night, when she slept, she didn't dream of crashes or coffins. She dreamed of clouds, of laughter in the cockpit, of Noah sitting beside her, alive, not judging, not grieving, just flying. The storm had passed, inside and out. Why did the building feel so familiar? Why, after years of silence, did walking through those glass doors feel like walking back into herself? 2 weeks after the landing, Emma Reynolds stood beneath the towering windows of the FRA Aviation Training Center in Oklahoma City. The morning sun reflected off parked aircraft outside, gleaming metal lined up in precision rows. A slim folder weighed in her hand, a reactivation request, instructor credentials, medical clearance. At the top, her name, Captain Emma Reynolds. Behind her, the buzz of voices, new cadets, young, nervous, their faces bright with adrenaline and ambition. Some carried coffee, others clutched textbooks like lifelines. They reminded her of herself years ago, before the crash, before Noah's coffin draped in a flag, before the silence she buried herself in. Now she was back, not to relive that past, but to reclaim something she thought she'd lost forever. The receptionist looked up and smiled warmly. "Captain Reynolds? Director Callan is expecting you. Simulator Bay 3. Emma nodded, her throat tightening around the word captain. She walked down the hall, the echo of her boots against polished floors sending memories rushing. Late-night drills whispered. Jokes with her brother, the sting of adrenaline before a mission. It didn't hurt anymore. It felt like opening an old book you once loved, one whose ending you finally understood. The bay door hissed open. Inside waited a state-of-the-art simulator, its screens glowing faintly with the virtual outline of storm clouds on the horizon. And standing nearby, in uniform, was Kyle. He grinned as soon as he saw her. "Told you I wasn't going to let you disappear." Emma smirked. "I had a feeling." He gestured toward the simulator. "Today's group, 3 cadets, all sharp, all scared. They've already heard about Denver. You're kind of legendary now." She rolled her eyes. "That's not why I'm here." "No," Kyle agreed, "but it's why they'll listen." The simulator doors opened with a hiss. Emma stepped inside, her fingers brushing the familiar controls. Her body reacted before her mind did, muscle memory sparking in her hands. She sat in the captain's seat, the screens flickering alive, storm clouds slowly building across the virtual horizon. The cadets entered behind her, wide-eyed, quiet. One barely looked 20. Another clutched a notepad like it could save him. They watched her, nervous, expectant. Emma turned to face them. "I'm not here to impress you," she said evenly. "I'm here because one day the unexpected will happen. Maybe in a storm, maybe mid-air, maybe when no one else knows what to do. And in that moment, you won't have time to think about fear." Her words lingered, heavy. "You'll only have time to fly." The cadets stayed silent, caught in the weight of it. Finally, one raised a tentative hand. "Ma'am, were you scared that day? When you stepped into the cockpit?" Emma didn't lie. "I was terrified." The cadets blinked, stunned. Pilots weren't supposed to admit fear, but she pressed on. "I moved anyway, because fear doesn't stop the plane. Action does, training does, trust does." The simulator roared to life. The cockpit shook with virtual turbulence, alarms blaring, the horizon tilting. The cadets stiffened in their seats. "Breathe," Emma instructed, her voice steady. "Don't let the alarm own you. Let it inform you. Control is contagious, and so is panic. Which one do you want to spread?" Slowly, she guided them. How to level a plane in wind shear. How to trim during turbulence. How to speak when your co-pilot is crumbling. How to be the calm when the sky itself is screaming. With every instruction, every motion, Emma felt something inside her settle, not back into the past, but forward into something new. When the session ended, Kyle walked with her back toward the offices. The cadets had filed out silently, shaken but grateful. "You know," Kyle said, glancing at her, "I think you might have just saved more lives today than you did on that flight." Emma smiled faintly. "That's the plan." Outside, the sky stretched deep and endless blue. She looked up, not with longing this time, but with peace. That night, she boarded a flight to Washington, D.C., invited as a guest of honor for a recognition gala. She wore a navy suit, not her old uniform. Not a dress, just herself. As the plane climbed, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're proud to share that on board today is Emma Reynolds, the woman who turned an ordinary seat into the captain's chair and brought 182 souls home in the middle of a storm." Applause filled the cabin. Passengers craned to see her, but Emma didn't stand. She didn't wave. She simply nodded, a small smile on her lips. She no longer needed the spotlight. The sky itself was enough. At the gala, she shook hands with executives, hugged passengers from Flight 227, and gave a short speech. "I used to think flying was something I left behind, but that day reminded me it was never gone. Sometimes the sky finds you again, and when it does, you don't say no, you fly." The room rose to its feet, a standing ovation thunderous enough to rival applause on the plane. Later that evening, Emma stepped onto her hotel balcony. The city lights glowed beneath her. The stars stretched overhead. She opened her flight logbook once more, turned to the next blank page, and wrote, Date, August 3rd. Aircraft, Boeing 737 simulator, duration, 25 hours, purpose. Instructor training, emergency response, location, FIA Training Center. Notes, first session teaching cadets, result. I'm not just flying again. I'm helping others learn to land. She closed the log gently, leaned back in her chair, whispered to the night air, "This is what I was meant to do." Why was it harder to walk through the quiet hallways than it had been to face the storm? Why, after applause and recognition, did silence still feel like the greatest test? Emma Reynolds adjusted the strap of her bag as she moved through the FAA Training Center. The buzz of cadets filled the air. Young pilots rushing to briefings, their conversations rapid-fire with acronyms and nerves. Some glanced at her with awe, whispering her name like it belonged to a story they had only read about. Emma didn't look at them. She never sought the spotlight. She only carried it because it refused to leave her. Inside Simulator Bay 4, another session waited. 3 cadets this time, all different. One steady but hesitant, one eager and reckless, one quiet, almost too quiet. Emma studied them as they settled into their seats. She recognized them, not their names, but their types. Every squadron had these faces. She stood before them, hands lightly clasped. Voice even, "Storms don't care who you are," she said. "They don't care how many hours you've logged. or what rank is stitched on your uniform. When the sky decides to test you, the only thing that matters is how you respond. The cadets leaned forward, listening. Emma turned toward the glowing screens as the simulator roared to life. Wind shear warnings blared. Turbulence shook the frame. Alarms screamed. The reckless cadet reached for the controls too quickly, jerking them sideways. The plane pitched. Emma's voice cut sharp. But calm. Don't fight it. Breathe. Feel it. Correct with precision, not panic. The hesitant cadet froze, eyes wide, hands hovering above the panel. Move, Emma said, firm but not unkind. Panic is freezing. Action is moving, even. If it's small, do something. And the quiet one, the one she almost worried about most, watched everything. Absorbing, silent, Emma guided them through it, letting them stumble, letting them falter, but never letting them fall. When the session ended, the screens dimmed and the hum of the simulator faded into silence. She turned back to them, her gaze steady. You'll never control the storm, she said softly, but you can control yourselves, and that will be enough. The cadets didn't move. They looked at her not as an instructor, but as proof. Proof that survival wasn't just possible, but human. After they left, Kyle joined her, leaning against the simulator doorframe with that easy grin he carried now. You know, he said, I've watched you land a real plane in a storm, and I've watched you train rookies in a fake one. Both times I was impressed, but this is different. You're not just flying anymore. You're teaching people how to believe in themselves. Emma arched an eyebrow. You always this sentimental? He shrugged. Almost dying makes you appreciate things. She almost smiled, almost. Days blurred into weeks. Emma found herself drawn back to the rhythm she thought she'd lost. Checklists, training sessions, long conversations with cadets who carried more fear than they admitted. She recognized pieces of herself in them and in helping them. She felt something repairing within her own chest. But the recognition outside these walls didn't fade. If anything, it grew louder. Headlines still followed her. News vans camped near her hotel. Invitations flooded her inbox. Interviews, speeches, book deals. She turned most of them down. She didn't want to be a spectacle. She only wanted to do the work. Yet she couldn't ignore the ripple effect. People saw her as something more than a survivor. They saw her as a symbol. Proof that heroes weren't always in uniform. Proof that sometimes the person you least expect is the one who steps forward. It felt heavy. Too heavy at times. One evening, after a long day of training, Emma sat alone. In the empty hangar, the smell of jet fuel lingering in the air, her flight logbook lay open on her lap. She traced the ink of her most recent entry, then flipped back to the one that had haunted her for years. Noah's name stared back at her. She closed her eyes. For so long, she had believed his story was the end of hers, that her wings had died with him, that she didn't deserve the sky if he couldn't share it. But maybe she had been wrong. Maybe the best way to honor him wasn't to stop flying. Maybe it was to keep going. Her phone buzzed again. Another headline, another request, another demand for her presence. She ignored it. She looked back at the runway stretching outside the hangar doors. Lights glowing faintly in the dark. For the first time, she didn't feel weighed down by the world's eyes. She felt lifted. The sky didn't demand. The sky invited. The next morning, she walked into the training center with a steadier step. The cadets greeted her differently now, not just as an instructor, but as a captain they could trust. Even the quiet ones spoke more. Kyle caught up with her in the hallway. You know, the FAA isn't going to let you hide behind training forever. They're already talking about you for larger programs. Emma glanced at him. Larger? Emergency response divisions, international training. There's even talk of joint military programs. She shook her head, half smiling. I came back to help, not to build a legacy. Too late, Kyle said simply. That night, Emma returned to her hotel. She stood at the window, city lights glittering below. The sky above stretched endless and dark. She opened her flight log once more. Her pen hovered for a long moment before she finally wrote. Date: August 10th, aircraft, simulator, 737, duration, 31 hours. Purpose: advanced cadet training. Notes: taught them not just how to fly, but how to trust themselves. Result: storms. Test machines. Fear tests people, and sometimes people pass. She set the log aside, closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she didn't dream of storms. She dreamed of clear skies. Why did the stars look different now? Why, after years of avoiding the sky, did every night feel like an invitation? Emma Reynolds stood on the balcony of her D.C. hotel, the gala still echoing in her ears. Applause, handshakes, speeches she never expected to give, people calling her a hero. She hadn't come for that. She hadn't wanted it. But something about it lingered, not in her pride, but in her purpose. The next morning, she returned to Oklahoma City, back to the training center, back to the quiet rhythm she was beginning to crave. Her first stop wasn't the simulator. It was the empty hangar. The Cessna she had flown days ago sat parked in the corner, sun spilling across its wings. She ran her hand along the fuselage, metal cool beneath her fingers. She thought of Noah, of his laughter, of his voice teasing her across radios. She whispered, "I'm still flying, little brother." Later, she walked into Bay 3, where a new group of cadets waited. They stiffened when she entered. The whispers followed her still. Denver. Flight 227. The passenger who wasn't a passenger at all. Emma didn't start with instructions. She started with silence, letting them fidget, letting the hum of the simulator fill the space. Then she spoke. One day, she said softly, "You'll be in a cockpit when everything goes wrong. Alarms will scream, wind will fight you, and you'll feel the weight of every life behind you. You'll wonder if you're enough, if you can do it, if you can move, and in that moment, the question won't be about fear. It'll be about choice. Do you freeze, or do you fly?" The cadets didn't answer. They didn't need to. She turned back to the simulator. "Let's find out." Hours later, after the session, Kyle walked with her again. His grin was easier now, his respect deeper. "You know, Emma, the way they look at you, it's not because of what you did. It's because of what you give them. You give them proof." Emma raised an eyebrow. "Proof? That fear isn't the end of the story. That moving anyway. That's enough." She didn't reply, but his words sank deep. That evening, an FAA director pulled her aside. "Captain Reynolds, we're expanding the emergency training program. We'd like you to lead it, not just here, internationally. Your Denver flight proves something we've always known. You can't teach courage, but you can show it, and you have." Emma hesitated. The old Emma would have said no, would have walked away, afraid of the weight, afraid of the past. But the woman standing here now wasn't hiding anymore. She nodded. "I'll do it." In the weeks that followed, Emma's life shifted. She wasn't just training cadets now. She was shaping programs, building scenarios, designing systems to prepare pilots for the storms no one thinks they'll face. She traveled. She spoke. She sat across from young men and women who doubted themselves, and she told them the truth. "I doubted too. I froze too. I broke too. But I moved anyway." And slowly, the legacy she never wanted began to take shape. Months later, she returned to Denver, the same airport where it had all begun. Flight 227's passengers had organized a reunion, an informal gathering. Some she remembered, others she didn't. But the gratitude in their eyes hadn't faded. An elderly woman from row 1-2 hugged her tightly, whispering, "I tell everyone." I sat beside Emma Reynolds the day the storm came, and you didn't let it win. A teenage boy, taller now, handed her a drawing he'd made, a plane slicing through clouds, her name written beneath it. A father thanked her for giving him more years with his daughter. Emma accepted each word, each gesture, not as praise, but as reminders, proof that what she had done rippled further than she would ever know. That night she sat once again in row 12B, the very seat where it began. The plane was empty now, long retired, but for her, it was sacred. She closed her eyes and remembered the fear, the weight, the silence before she stood. She whispered, too, the seat to the storm, to herself, "You're not just a passenger anymore." When she left, she carried something new. Not just the memory of what had happened, but the certainty of what it meant. Weeks later, her logbook filled with new entries. Training sessions, flights, speeches, each line proof that she wasn't done. Proof that Noah's story didn't end hers. Her final entry that year read, date, December 12th, aircraft, simulator and Cessna 172, duration, 54 hours, purpose, training and personal flight, location, multiple notes. Legacy isn't about never falling. It's about rising when you thought you couldn't. Result, the sky still feels like home. That night, Emma sat on another balcony. Stars stretched endless above her. She didn't feel haunted anymore. She felt whole. And she understood something at last. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.